guys. Okay, so I just got done watching more from the judiciary hearing in Senate today. It was about freedom of speech, peacefully protesting, and the focus seemed to be on Portland, although we've been seeing rioting, looting, protesting, all of that stuff in a lot of cities all across the country for the past few months in the wake of George Floyd. So please, if you don't know what the hearing was about in more detail, watch the video that I posted before this where I talk about sort of the beginning of the judiciary hearing. These are very long. They usually have several panels, lots of senators speak, the panelists speak, and they answer questions. The last panel, the one that I just watched, they had Andy Ngo, who I talked about in the first video. They had Jonathan Turley, who is a college professor, and another guy, but I wanted to focus on Andy Ngo and Jonathan Turley. Andy Ngo is a journalist, and he has been covering and making sort of Antifa and their tactics sort of all he's been covering for the past several years. He's gone undercover to protests and riots. He's been on college campuses. He's actually been attacked by Antifa, and he's been threatened by them. He's actually a target by Antifa. So even when he goes to Congress, he makes it very known. I am scared for my safety, but I'm more scared at the state of our country if this type of thing is not addressed. And the reason it's so dire is, Antifa has been recently designated a domestic terrorist organization. They are said to be anti-fascist. They're against freedom of speech. They think freedom of speech is a form of oppression. They think violent tactics against any American institution is justified. And their goal is to basically bring down America and all of the institutions of America. So they're not necessarily democratic, although they are a lot of times called far leftist, which they are, but they don't identify with classic liberalism. They don't identify with conservatives. They actually hate conservatives more than anything. They target conservatives, they're violent towards conservatives, and they try to shut down any sort of discourse between a conservative and a liberal. They've been doing this on college campus for years, and thankfully you had Professor Jonathan Turley saying this. I've been watching this for years, and now we're seeing this spill out into basically mainstream everyday life. And the most concerning thing about this is you have professors and politicians, Democratic politicians, who are basically denying their existence. You recently had Jerry Nadler, who was approached by a few journalists in Washington, D.C., and he said on camera that Antifa is a myth. Even though we all know this is not true, they're very much out there. They're very highly organized. They have different chapters all throughout the country. There are books, websites, all kinds of stuff, and you can see it. I actually saw it personally here in LA the night that we had the riots. I accidentally got caught in the middle of a very scary situation while I was trying to get out of this area. I've seen them in person. There's tons and tons and tons, hours and hours worth of footage that journalists have caught going undercover. But even still, with all of this out there, you have Democratic officials who are saying that they do not exist. And you have Jerry Nadler basically saying that they're a myth on camera. So during this hearing, Ted Cruz, who I think is just, I'm sorry if you don't like Ted Cruz. I know he gets a lot of criticism, but he was the rock star of the day. Him and Andy Ngo, and I think Jonathan Turley. I love all of these guys. I think Andy Ngo is super brave. Follow his YouTube channel and follow him on Twitter if you want to see the coverage that he gets of Antifa. It's Andy Ngo is his YouTube and his Twitter. Jonathan Turley has been saying that he thinks teaching is basically dead, and there's a lot of problems with teaching right now because there is no political discourse in class, there is no diversity of thought, there is no debate, and conservative ideas and questions are being silenced. There is no freedom of speech anymore on a lot of these college campuses, and you have teachers who are afraid and who just go with whatever they're supposed to do in fears of losing their jobs and personal safety. You have teachers who have spoken out against some of this suppression of freedom of speech, and these teachers have to have police escorts, they have to have protection, and some of them have had to resign or have been fired for simply speaking their mind. So this is a problem that's been very alive for quite some time, but it's been kind of hidden from mainstream. And now that these protests and riots are happening, people that maybe used to not know about Antifa and sort of these tactics are now becoming aware of it, but Democratic officials are still kind of trying to sweep it under the rug. And this exact thing happened during the hearing. So you would have witnesses, you would have, we had the Secretary of Homeland Security, you have Andy Ngo, a journalist, you have a professor, you have all of these witnesses who are saying this is real and this is happening, and they are winning. Antifa is winning. And half the reason we know they're winning is because you are sitting there and denying their existence. They're very real. They're out there, and they want to destroy the fabric of America. And even still, with all of this evidence, with all of these, there was video footage being shown, there were personal accounts, and you also had experts in Antifa, and they're holding up books, they're holding up manifestos that is basically saying, we want to tear down America. And even still, when it was time for the Democratic senators to question, they completely divert to other things. They completely divert to, well, you're not saying anything about this anti-Muslim group, or you're not saying anything about white supremacy. And every single Republican says, we condemn white supremacy. We condemn racism on any level. But even still, it was almost like somebody gathered all the Democrats together and were like, whatever you do, do not say Antifa. Do not condemn them. Not one Democratic leader or official condemned the violence on Antifa, which is very concerning. And if you don't believe me, watch it for yourself. It's on C-SPAN. It's on YouTube. You can see this. So a few more highlights. Let's see. Oh, you had basically Senator Leslie Graham, who I like a lot. I don't agree with everything that he does, but I do like him a lot. He basically said in the hearing today, because a lot of this hearing was Democratic officials criticizing the decision to send in federal officers, even though it was local federal protection services that requested these officers. It wasn't anyone on the federal label forcing these officers to go in there. It was local officials who asked the officers to go in because they were not getting help by law enforcement, and they were being told to stand down. They needed more help to protect the federal buildings. That's why these officers went in. This was not Donald Trump on a tirade trying to control these cities. They went in because they had to, and they were requested by local officials. So a lot of this hearing was Democratic officials basically criticizing the choice to send these officers in, and Senator Leslie Graham, who's a Republican senator, basically said if these officers weren't sent in, the federal courthouse would have been burnt to the damn ground, is basically the language that he used, which is true. So it's like you're either on this side of the courthouse being burnt down, or you're for federal officers protecting it. Very strange. Another thing that happened, I'm going to play this video for you at the end. There were two videos shown. Well, two that I saw personally, so I can only speak on those two. The first video that was shown was a video by Democratic officials. And in the video, it looked like it was from, this was a documentary that was done by some news station. And it was hard to even take the video seriously because they're showing the federal officers and they're calling them the secret police and these unnamed officers. Literally, while they're showing the video of these unnamed officers, you can see them, and it clearly says police, and they have identification on both sides of their arm. The second video that was shown was by Republican Senator Ted Cruz, and he showed what is really going on in these cities, and I'm going to play it for you at the end. I just wanted to say one more thing that Senator Ted Cruz said. So Senator Ted Cruz got up and basically condemned a lot of the Democratic leaders. He said there were 7 Democratic senators here today, and not a single one of them condemned the violence of Antifa, which was true. He also said that he's introducing new legislation, and it's called the Reclaim Act. Now, I'm sure you can already sue your city if you don't feel like you were protected, but this, I think, is putting it in a new, formal written thing. So Senator Ted Cruz is introducing the Reform Act, and this is basically saying in any event of a riot or any kind of violence, if your property was damaged, if you were assaulted, if your business was looted, if anything was broken in, you are able to sue your local government for failure to protect you, for failure to provide police protection. And he's saying that this is a civil rights violation. If your city is telling your law enforcement to stand down, and because of that you've had property, or if you've had property that was damaged, looted, or items stolen out of, whether it's personal or your business, or if you were assaulted in the wake of all of this. So that's what Senator Cruz is introducing. What are your thoughts on that? Also, okay, I think that's it. That's all I'm going to talk about this hearing today. That was exhausting watching it. But here's the video that Senator Cruz showed at the end, because everyone kept wanting to call these peaceful protests and say that they were peaceful and there's not violence happening. So he put this video together and showed them. Here it is. Let me know what you think of that and all of this, and I'll see you later. Bye.
And please, show me where it says that protests are supposed to be polite and peaceful.
With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. To stand up for freedom together, so let freedom reign.
A passionate movement for justice is finding itself swept under the feet of rampaging and destructive mobs.
People will do what they do.
Something's on fire!
The myth that's being spread only in Washington, D.C.
77-year-old David Dorn was shot to death as a pawn shop he was protecting was being looted.
Federal Protective Service officer Dave Underwood was killed. Authorities say it was a targeted attack on law enforcement.
This is ridiculous. These people are tearing up our livelihood.